Maybe
Ooh, am I opening with the hot takes? I think the 4B movement is sexist, and so is political lesbianism, because both of them operate on the delusional assumption that women's libido are low enough that rationality and political interest for a group would overwhelm individual interest for love, romance, or sex. Are you insane? Do you have any idea how strong the sex, romance, like, the partner drive is in human beings? Most human beings? I genuinely feel like it's born from the idea that, like, men like sex and women endure sex, and for that reason, like, women withholding sex is like, oh, they're fine, you know? Dude, most chicks would go crazy without sex. Same with most guys. Like, that's just how it is. Like, but not only sex, but, like, romance, interpersonal relationships, not really low? Yeah, really low. Yeah. It's literally, like, one of the most inbuilt drives. Like, it's insane. That's why so many of the political lesbians ended up marrying gay men, like dwarfmen. I think the 4B movement's right responsible as all collection. It doesn't matter whether or not you think it's rightful, like, it doesn't work and it's stupid. Also, they're sex negative and reactionary and terse, you know? Like, hating men isn't revolutionary. They were doing that shit 4,000 years ago, okay? Trust me. It's not feminist. It's just, like, it's literally MGTOW, but the other way around. Has MGTOW done anything for men? Why don't we engage in, like, a sensible version of this rhetoric? Why don't we just say something like, I don't know.
Yeah?
If you have a boyfriend or husband who actively wants to take your rights away, maybe don't be in a relationship with them. Like, that's fine, right? I forego what MGTOW is. Men going their own way. Again, this isn't even like a defending men kind of thing. It's literally just like, this doesn't work, and it always turns out poorly. You're not wrong with misogyny is insane Korea. Yeah, and has the 4B movement fixed it? You know, I have a great idea. I think that separating men and women, like, socially, is the best way to address misogyny. Let's take a look at societies that separate men and women. Saudi Arabia, how are things going over there? You think it's a joke, I'm not joking. Like, literally, the thing that, like, makes people not hate each other is familiarity, engaging with one another. Like, we see this with different races in, like, inner cities, where the most racist people in the world live out in the sticks and never meet the color skin that they hate, you know? And then if you're in the city where you're around black and Asian and Hispanic people or whatever, like, statistically speaking, it bleeds away, you know? You think that, like, women practicing, like, a nationwide 4B movement, like, that's going to fix anything? Absolutely not. Unfortunately, the main contribution of the 4B movement was them unifying to deny a trans woman from a women's college. Anyone who's surprised that the 4B movement is transphobic has, like, the political instincts of a rodent. Obviously, you kidding me? The literal, like, rad fem men are inherently biologically evil movement that practices, like, insane social abstinence and reactionary thinking, like, that would be transphobic. Like, obviously. I'm pretty sure the 4B movement Twitter account literally has hashtag It does? It does? Okay, that rules. There's an official 4B movement Twitter account? No, but it's like one of the largest. 4B and Turfsville come from second wave. York? I did not know. All good, Fred. All good, crack pipe. Prometheus. Why do people usually say that only sexually frustrated men turn to the right but not the other way? Why don't sexually frustrated women turn to the right? Because women are the gatekeepers of sex. This is like the bell curve thing, where low IQ people say that, and medium IQ people say otherwise, and high IQ people say that. They obviously are. Like, don't be stupid. If women want to have sex, they can have sex. Women don't usually find themselves in positions where they are just incapable of talking to or making, like, relationships with other people. They have other issues. Femcells aren't real. Femcells aren't people who can't get laid. They're people who don't like the men that God is presenting them. And you know what? Can't blame you. I've been on Grindr. I know what men are like. Crazy, guys. Yeah, it's crazy to me that any men get laid, to be honest with you. How is 4B anti-trans? It's just like, you can literally Google 4B transphobia. Like, the movement is not pro-trans at all. It's anti-trans. They think that trans women are men that are deceiving people with makeup and dresses to try to, like, rape women at that point. Exact same thing rad femmes have done over here in the West. For what it's worth, a lot of incels also can get laid. Yeah, but let's not, like, draw a false comparison here. It is possible, like, there are a lot of men for whom their life is a social void. They talk to no one, they engage with no one. If they talk to people, like, in public in the street, they get, like, weird looks. They have nothing and no one. Does this happen to some women? Yeah, but let's not like pretend this isn't a gendered issue. people see men. That's not true. It is true. It's absolutely 100% true, and you will never be able to talk about men's issues in this country without acknowledging that a lot of men, a significant number of men, are in like a black hole socially. Like they have nothing, no one, and they don't even know how to start. There are women who are like this, but it's there's a disparity. There's absolutely a disparity. Do you think Paul Zigo is right in that Dems are too corporate and weak to beat Trump? Was Paul Zigo the only one saying that? Clearly, the Democrats are too corporate and weak to beat Trump. Yeah. I still think it would be preferable that they had beaten Trump. I've been making this criticism like I've been like a Bernie-crat from the word go, you know? It's completely true. I didn't know whether or not they literally wouldn't be able to beat Trump, only that, you know, better they try. Man, chronologists really were cooking, weren't they? You know what I mean. Chronologists win all of their research is debunked. You guys might not be ready for this, but your grandkids, they're gonna love it. And they were right. I do. Probably not grandkids, I guess. Great-grandkids.
If you're sure that's what you
Another
want.
problem with the 4B movement conceptually is you guys realize that white women came out as hard for Trump as white men did, right? Like, there was barely any difference. The real, like, gender gap was Latin men and Latin women. The white men and white women came out for almost the same rate. Honestly, like, in terms of your dating life, I would just avoid white people. I know that this is one of the most, like, you know, I'm one of the good ones ass statement that you could possibly make, but I will say you can include me in that. That's all right. You could recognize me walking down, like, Pike Street in Capitol Hill, and you could say, holy shit, that's why. And then you remember, I'm a white man. And you keep on walking. Did you see the most important issue for swing voters was that Kamala Harris was too pro-trans? Yeah, of course. Reality doesn't matter, only narrative matters. Republicans crafted a very compelling, very correct feeling narrative about Democrats being too woke and communist and blah-de-blah-de-blah and elitist and so on. And Democrats had basically nothing to push back on. Well, I mean, they didn't. Like, they could have, but they didn't.
Not a problem.
Never do human beings speculate more or have more opinions than about things which they do not understand. From his childhood, Hollywood experienced strange and seemingly unexplainable phenomena. He feared and went on quests to discover what they meant. Swimming rubble in the death of 2 weeks passed his turn, still more violent than before, and an inner voice spoke. Look at it. It is completely real.
If you're sure that's what you want.
You have returned! And which battle would you like to fight?
Visions just before the First World War broke out. When this happened, he was sure that no schizophrenia was threatening him. He understood that his dreams and visions came to him from the subsoil of the collective unconscious. How are such meaningful events, not linked by any apparent cause of change, possible? What does this say about the crystal universe? These were
I captured the personality. How he got there, I don't know. But he does some skeleton with supernatural speed.
During the summer holidays, Joe was studying his textbooks, and heard the sound of the institution, rushed to the nearest split from the large sensitive, certain to answer to another side. This time he saw the side of the which had been short before and slept for several pieces. June finished his medical studies and became a psychiatrist. During this time, this formed the basis of his medical dissertation, published in 1982, entitled The Psychology and Pathology of So-Called Occult Phenomena, Psychiatric Study. On one occasion, Jung was having a conversation with Freud about psychology. Freud, in his materialism, rejected most of Jung's questions as nonsensical. Jung had a strange sensation as if his diaphragm were made of iron and were becoming red hot, which stood right next to him. Then both of them stood up in awe, very seriously. They were told that there is some sort of the third would find out the and to prove his point, he predicted that in a moment there will be another such loud noise. Another detonation went off in the bookcase. Jung wrote, "To this day I do not know what gave me this certainty, but I know beyond all doubt that the report would come again. For it only stared aghast at me. I do not know what was in his mind or what his look meant."
With ease.
In 1928, when he was drawing the man that was present in his red book, the sonora of the secret of the golden flower, the Taoist alchemical book of life that teaches an ancient Chinese meditation practice for
While the
achieving
spell
wholeness.
is mighty, the visceral impact of particles, the crunch, and the rending.
When I was painting
A team of pulverizing cubes ready to pound the precious life out of our proud defender.
sending a 1,000-year-old Chinese text that was our personal journal of the This was a business the spark leapt across and kindled their light that was to become for me one of the most significant events of my life. I feel myself so very much enriched by him that it seems to me as if I had received more from him than from any other man. Jung was particularly struck by the drawing of a yogi with 5 human figures growing out of the top of his head, and 5 more figures growing out of the top of each of the heads. Pictures of Jung portrays the spiritual state of the yogi, who is able to rid himself of his many egos and pass into the more complete.
If you're sure that's what you want.
Jung coined the term synchronicity and mentions it publicly for the first time in 1930 in his memorial address for Richard Wilhelm, who also translated the I Ching, or Book of Changes. He referred to it as a peculiar principle active in the world, so that things happen together somehow and behave as if they were the same, and yet for us they are not. Jung equated it with the Chinese concept of Tao, the union of opposites from the complementary paths of Jing. It is based on the oneness of man and the surrounding cosmos. This is akin to the alchemical credo, as it is, referring to the inner world and outer world, the psyche and matter being one and the same. The aim of the Tao sage is to live in harmony with the Tao, and thereby avoiding falling into one extreme or the other. This is, in fact, the goal of Jungian psychology, the balance of opposites. Consciousness and the unconscious.
It's in the bag.
It's aligning the ego to the self at center of the personality. Where synchronicity plays a vital role. There's no linear evolution of individuation and self-realization. There's only a circumambulation, the circling around in which everything is related to the center. This is represented by the symbol of the mandala. For Jung, finding one's own mandala symbol is crucial for the development of the self. For circular movement to take place, the mandala must have a symbol, such as the sun, a castle, or a golden flower in its center. It is a visual image of the divine pattern, a manifestation of the self. The end result is the alchemical procedure Mysterium Conjunctionis, which is also the title of Jung's last great work. The opposite sides of life are united in a holy marriage. There's a heightening and clearness of consciousness and a deepening sense of unity of being. Jung comments that Atman, Tao, and Christ are different cultural symbols for wholeness that correlate the inner self with the animating principle of the cosmos. It is no longer you that live, it lives you. The oracle of the I Ching played an important role in developing his idea of synchronicity. He used it with patients in psychotherapy and could remember a great deal of meaningful answers and unusual psychological insights. For instance, He recalls the story of a patient suffering from
In which
another
battle would you
complex
like to fight?
who feared his prospective marriage partner might be domineering. And it showed the hexagram for support entitled Coming to Me, which stated, "The maiden is powerful, one should not
Enjoy
attempt."
toys less developed.
These
I captured
experiments
Thieves.
demonstrated that there are meaningful connections between psychic realm and
How we got there, I don't know. But he
for more
does
than
some
30 years.
skeletons with
I've been interested myself in this whole technique or method of explaining the unconscious, for it has seemed to be of uncommon significance. It relates to a certain curious principle that at the time is synchronicity, a concept that further makes it counterfeit about natural rules of universality. Since the latter is a statistical truth, it is a sort of working hypothesis of how events evolve one out of another, whereas synchronicity takes the coincidence of events in space and time as meaning something more than mere chance. Causality is the way we explain the link between two successive events, the force of striking a moving ball which could be affected the whole movement. Synchronicity, however, is a meaningful coincidence of outer and inner events that are close together. The opposites of this meaning because the inwardly perceived events, dream, vision, premonition, thought, or mood, seem to have a correspondence in external reality. The inner image has come true. The inner world and the outer world coincide, bringing new to the synchronicity derives from the prefix "sin," again, the word chronos, time. It means a system happening at the same time. The word coincidence, incidents happening together. However, synchronicities are not typical coincidence, but rather meaningful coincidence of two real events. The plot puzzled him for a long time. When he was investigating the phenomena of the collective unconscious, he kept on having false coincidences working into a certain unity that they broke all statistical probabilities. I cannot imagine events that are connected with causal history of non-causal explanation, but that does not mean that such events do not exist. The Nobel physicist Wolfgang Pauli sought therapy for common and shared many of his dreams. Becoming a quantum physicist and to have a couple of dreams was an extraordinary find. After he no longer was a patient, he would keep up his correspondence with Jung. This is documented in the book Atom and Archetype, which featured a whole group of letters. Through their joint effort, they've come to see synchronicity as a main causal principle that transcends space, time, and causality. It took nearly 20 years for them to reach their conclusion that graduating controversial ideas. Jung and Paul published their joint work, The Interpretation of Nature and Psychology. He wrote, "As a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, I've often come up against the phenomena in question and could convince myself how much these inner experiences meant to my patients. In most cases, they were things which people do not talk about for fear of exposing themselves to thoughtless ridicule. I was amazed to see how many people have had experiences of this kind and how carefully the secret was guarded." Jung did not have the necessary means to conduct scientific experiments on synchronicity. He refers to the extrasensory perception experiments of J.B. Rhine, who founded parapsychology as a branch of psychology. The experiments show evidence for acausal combinations of events, where chance concurrence represents a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure. It goes beyond the scope of chance and probability. For instance, in a card experiment consisting of 25 cards with 5 different signs, the subject is separated by a screen from the experimenter and had to try to guess the cards 800 times. One young man, who in numerous experiments scored an average of 10 hits for every 25 cards, double the probable number. Once guessed all 25 cards correctly, which gives a probability of around 1 in 298 quadrillion. Jung does not seek a complete description and explanation of these complicated phenomena, but to open an obscure field which is philosophically of the greatest importance. His interest in this problem is not merely scientific, but most importantly, he seeks to delve into the human soul. Jung attempts to account for synchronistic events, primarily in terms of his concept of archetype, which are patterns of instinctual behavior responsible for the organization of unconscious psychic processes. Archetypes constitute the structure of the collective unconscious, which represents a psyche that is identical in all individuals, and contains the images of all creation. The archetypes arrange the psychic material and produce uniform patterns in the physical world. They cannot be directly seen or represented.
gruesome fate waits you at the hand of this Broadway mob of
On account
miscreants.
of its
I hate
irrepresentable
the foolish
nature,
heavy
Jung
is
has
perhaps the victim.
the soul body, which refers to the relationship between a person's psyche and the physical world beyond that person's body. We find ourselves with a fact that has nothing to do with brain activity, but rather with meaningful patterns in our personal life. Meaningful coincidences rest in an archetypal foundation, synchronicity with this thread of archetypal reality, where psyche and matter collide in constant. This unitary dimension is all experience, is the uncountable motion of influence the world world. Jung writes, symbolism is the psychological equivalent of the emotional.
Yes.
Then synchronicity is its parapsychological equivalent. Psychological life is an expression of nature. In this case, we have to suppose a knowledge applied to all consciousness. Synchronistic phenomena are thought to arise from activations of this level of reality. There seems to be an a priori, causally inexplicable knowledge of a situation which at the time is unknowable. In therapy, seemingly the person is radically sensitive is limited against the feeling that unites and attributes two participants that is transformative. The unconscious communications that link both parties may usefully be described as emerging out of the
Are you sure that's what you want?
concentrates limited perception of powerless adaptation possessing psychological that synchronistic events tend to occur. Psychic life is fundamentally a shared unitary. The forms of the self, the place where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. It is the idea that everything that will happen is that is the magic of synchronicity. Jung tells us a story about the 19th century French poet, the Shah, who was given a piece of plum pudding by so-called Boucher. 10 years later, he discovered another plum pudding in a Paris restaurant and asked if he could have a piece. It turned out, however, that the plum pudding was
You have
already
slain a bunch of boozy
cheaper.
machine.
Many years afterwards, Duchamp was invited to partake of a plum pudding as a special rarity. While he was eating it, he remarked that the only thing lacking was Du for Jibu. At that moment, the door opened, and an old man in the last stages of disorientation walked in. Du for Jibu, who had got hold of the wrong address and burst in on the party by mistake. Jung writes about what seems to be a synchronistic event. On April 1, 1949, I made a note in the morning of an inscription containing a figure that was half man and half fish. There was fish for lunch. Somebody mentioned the custom of making an April fish of someone. In the afternoon, a former patient of mine, whom I had not seen for months, showed me some impressive pictures of fish. In the evening, I was shown a piece of embroidery with sea monsters and fishes in it. The next morning, I saw a former patient who was visiting me for the first time in 10 years. She had dreamed of a large fish the night before. A few months later, when I was using this series for larger work and had just finished writing it down, I walked over to a spot by the lake in front of the house, where I had already been several times that morning. This time, a fish a foot long lay on the seawall. Since no one else was present, I have no idea how the fish could have got there. When coincidences pile up in this way, one cannot help being impressed by them. However, Jung had his doubts on it being a synchronicity, for there was no interaction with the inner world. He says it might well be the extremely improbable chance grouping of 6 events, the 7th event occurring months later. Jung also cautions that synchronicity can be misused or misinterpreted in a pathological way. People may be carried away and start to see every event as meaningful. Jung had already commented on this relation to situations where patients, particularly schizophrenics, interpret events as having a special reference to them. He wrote in a letter, "I have often found that synchronistic experiences were interpreted by schizophrenics as delusional. Since archetypal situations are not uncommon in schizophrenia, we must also suppose that corresponding synchronistic phenomena will occur, which follow exactly the same code as with so-called normal persons. The schizophrenic's interpretation is morbidly narrow because it is mostly restricted to the intentions of other people and to his own ego importance. We must endeavor to find out what the unconscious thinks and adjust our attitude accordingly. Thus, the synchronistic phenomenon. On one occasion, Jung and the members of a seminar conducting dream analysis were discussing the symbol of the bull god in relation to unaware of the discussions of the seminar group. The analysis spent several days making a picture of a bull with a disc of the
is mightier than
on another occasion,
the visceral impact of body,
she tells me
the
about the first
crunch
dream
of and the
that
remedy.
made an everlasting impression.
Behold, a
She had
team
seen
of
a spectral
pulverizing
flash
truth
coming down the
out the
stairs.
precious life out of our proud.
At this moment, a real fox comes out of the trees about 40 yards away and walks quietly the path ahead of us for several minutes. The animal behaves as if it were a partner in the human situation. The fox is the symbol of instinctive cleverness, which tell the woman to forget about her hesitations and to conquer her intellectual blocks by trusting her instinctive wisdom, which will show her the right way. Jung gives us another example appropriate to synchronicity. I remember the story of a student friend whose father had promised him a trip to Spain and passed the final examinations satisfactorily. My friend thereupon dreamed that he was walking through a Spanish city. The street led to a square where there was a Gothic cathedral. He then turned right around a corner into another street. There he was met by an elderly carriage drawn by 2 cream-colored horses. Then he woke up. He told us about the dream as we were sitting around a table drinking beer. Shortly afterward, having successfully passed his examinations, he went to Spain. There, in one of the streets, he recognized the city of his dream. He found the square and the cathedral, which exactly corresponded to the dream image. He wanted to go straight to the cathedral, but then he remembered that in the dream he was curious to find out whether his dream would be corroborated further. Hardly had he turned the corner when he saw in reality the carriage with the 2 cream-colored horses. The sentiment of deja vu is based on foreknowledge of dreams that can also occur in the waking state. In this case, chance becomes highly improbable, and coincidence is known in advance. Jung tells the story of one of his patients whom he pulled out of a depression. The patient's wife put a tremendous burden on him, which he was incapable of carrying. After a year of marriage, he fell into new depression. Jung told him to
What you got for me this time?
but due to the influence of his wife, the patient did not reply back. At that time, Jung returned to his hotel at midnight after lecturing. He wrote, "At about 2 o'clock,
Only because
I
you
must have
asked
just
for it.
fallen asleep. I awoke with a start and had the feeling that someone had come into the room. I even had the impression that the door had been hastily opened. I instantly turned on the light. There was nothing. Someone might have mistaken the door for glass. I looked into the corridor, but it was still as death. Odd, I
It's in
thought.
the bag.
Someone did come into the room. Then I tried to recall exactly what had happened.
Top of my
It occurred to me that I had been awakened by a feeling of cold
What do you
pain,
want?
as though something had struck my forehead and then the back of my skull. The following day I received a telegram saying that my patient had committed suicide. He had shot himself. Later, I learned that the bullet had come to rest in the back wall of the child. This synchronicity was observed in connection with an archetypal situation, in this case, death. Jung had perceived something atemporal and aspatial, which in reality was taking place elsewhere. In this case, the unconscious had knowledge of his patient's condition. Perhaps Jung's most well-known example of synchronicity is that of the scarab, an encoding habitual symbol in the form of an archetype transformation. Jung had a hard time with his patient, who was psychologically inaccessible. The patient was extremely rational and would not leave placing her while the unconscious. Jung wrote, "A young woman I was treating had, at a critical moment, a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. While she was telling me this dream, I sat with my back to the closed window. Suddenly I heard a noise behind me, like a gentle tapping. I turned round and saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the nearest analogy to a golden scarab that one finds in our latitudes. A scarab be a beetle, the common roach chafer, Setonia aurata, which, contrary to its usual habits, had evidently felt an urge to get into a dark room at this particular moment. I must admit that nothing like it ever happened to me before and that the dream of the patient has remained unique in my experience. This seems to suggest that abnormal random phenomena may occur when a vital need or urge is aroused. Jung handed the creature to his patient with the words, "Here is the scarab." The experience broke the ice of intellectual resistance. It helped me get in touch with her feelings and had a transformative impact on her, connecting her dream world to her waking life. Ego died, giving birth to a new self. Jung uses these examples only as a paradigm of the innumerable cases of near-death incidents that have been observed not only by him but by many others and recorded in large collections. Synchronicities accompany the crucial phases of the process of individuation, but too often they pass unnoticed because the individual has not learned to watch for such coincidences and look meaningfully in relation to the symbolism of his inner life. Be on the watch for that that may seem random. If you let them live within you for some time, synchronicity is a way of coming to realize what is in our deepest, undiscovered self. In 1961, Jung had just finished his last work, a contribution to man and his symbols, entitled Approaching the Unconscious, after a dream advised him to make his works accessible for the general public. 3 days before his death, he had several dreams, the last of which were communicated to us. He dreamed that he was high up in a high place around a boulder of stone in the full sun. Carved into it were the words, "Take this as a symbol of the wholeness you have achieved and the singleness you have become." In another dream, he saw a square and trees growing in it. The roots of the trees were intertwined with gold, a symbol of resolution, the alchemical symbol of wholeness. The collective unconscious was saying to him, as it were, "You have earned the freedom to move on. You have done your work. You have done it well, and it will grow." Just before Jung's death, his friend Lawrence van der Poos, who was on a voyage from Africa to Europe, had a dream of Jung waving goodbye. Nature joined in a couple of hours later. A thunderstorm struck and destroyed one of Jung's favorite trees in the garden where he used to sit. Some years later, Van
While the
Hose
spell
was
is
fully
mighty
at the Jung house
is
in
lost
Syracuse
during a
when
sunset.
the hammer
Here's that with this orange act of butter, the chorus of and the
Jung's
reindeer.
favorite tree. The lightning struck him.
A team of pulverizing pugilists ready to pound the precious life out of our proud defenders.
For those who have eyes to see.
Yeah? What do you want?
Mankind has speculated about the afterlife since the dawn of civilization. In Duat, the Egyptian underworld, the hearts of the dead were weighed against a feather. The heart was considered as the most important of the internal organs, and the source of human wisdom, which could reveal the person's true character. If the heart weighed more than the feather, it was immediately consumed, and one would remain restless forever in the underworld. If the heart was found lighter or equal in weight, it symbolized that the deceased led a life of virtue
It's in the bag.
and would go on to the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. Thus, aligning one's actions to one's heart was considered as the key to paradise. For the ancient Greeks, the land of the dead was known as Hades, who was also the king god of the underworld. While there was a belief of the existence of the soul after death, it was seen as meaningless. The inhabitants of the underworld had no sense of purpose. Similarly, in the Old Testament, there's no mention of hell nor heaven. The dead, whether good or bad, went to the realm of the shades, known as Sheol, the place of darkness and eternal sleep. Thus, they lacked a direct conception of the afterlife. It was only later in the New Testament that hell was thought of as a place of punishment. Today, most of us think of hell as a fiery place containing the souls of the damned who have committed heinous acts in life. They must endure eternal punishment and torture by demons. The devil reigns over hell as the incarnation of the platonic idea of evil, the perfect form of evil. Hell is understood as the archetype of ultimate suffering. We often say, "I've been to hell and back," when we experience extreme suffering, whether physical or psychological. Thus, hell is no imaginary place, but rather a state of consciousness that we all experience at some point in our lives in different intensities. Hell, however, is also an unavoidable journey in life. In ancient mysteries or rituals of passages, the hero must descend into a dark place in order to give birth to a new consciousness and gain access to a new stage of life. It is the most profound psychological death and rebirth of the self. We will be exploring the journey into hell as the path to self-knowledge. No tree on this earth can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. In his play, No Exit, French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre depicts a psychological hell, leading to his famous declaration, "Hell is other people." Rather than being misanthropic, it is a psychological exploration
got for me
of
this
this
time.
idea
Now,
of the
I'll
look.
get right on that.
Sartre depicts two women and a man locked in a mysterious room. They are unable to escape the devouring gaze of one another. One of the women accuses the man of stealing her face because she feels automatically judged by his stare. The look deprives the characters of their individuality, freedom and responsibility, and locks them into a particular kind of being as an object in other people's views. The experience of always being under the eyes of others forces them to lose themselves and become a collection of mirrors, reflecting what the outward effects of them. At the end, the man finally realizes what hell is. All those eyes intent on me, devouring me. What? Only two of you? I thought there were more, many more. So, this is hell. I would never have believed it. You remember all we were told about the torture chambers, the fire, the brimstone, the burning wall, old wives' tales. There's no need for red-hot pokers. Hell
If you're sure
is
that's what
other
you want.
people. In his book, The Pride of the Myth, American existential psychologist Rollo May writes a short chapter on the therapist and the journey to hell. Therapy is the prologue to life, rather than life itself. The therapist seeks to help the other person to the point of where he can move forward in life, solve his problems, and overcome the obstacles independently. The task of the therapist is not to cure, but to be a guide, friend, and interpreter to people on their journey through their private hell. Each one of us has or will have private hells trying to be confronted, and we have to find some barriers to make progress unaided against these obstacles, which is why the presence of a guide is central and has a powerful effect upon the patient. We're all in limbo. We're all struggling alone in the human condition. The issue is not to have problems, but to fail to be aware of them and fail to confront them. Human beings can reach heaven only through hell. The journey through hell cannot be omitted. Hell provides a vital wisdom. Without suffering, one cannot get to hell. The agony, the horror, the sadness are a necessary prelude to self-realization and a purity of heart. No light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes that comes to war, but torture without end still urges, and a fiery deluge, fed with ever-burning sulfur, unconsumed. This is how hell is portrayed by the English poet John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost entirely through dictation after having gone blind. It is hopelessness even more than pain that crushes the soul. He describes a rebellion in heaven prior to the creation of Adam and Eve and the expulsion of Lucifer and the fallen angels to hell. Milton paints Lucifer as an ambivalent character who declares, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven." Dante's epic poem, The Divine Comedy, was completed in 1320, a year before his death. The main character is Dante himself, who travels through hell, purgatory, and heaven. These three stages are simultaneous and coexisting aspects of all human experience. The work is described as a comedy because it starts up bad and ends up good, as opposed to a tragedy. The book opens with one of the most iconic lines in literature. I awoke to find myself alone and lost in a dark wood, having wandered from a straight path. Dante the poet says that it is the journey of hell. That is to say, it is not just about his journey, but rather about everyone's story on the path to self-knowledge and spiritual awakening, which begins by descending into hell. Dante wrote in 35, which was considered as midlife. This book is the ultimate expression of midlife crisis, a critical phase of existential transformation, which the ancient Greeks called metanoia, mental transformation. Dante makes you think seriously about your own life, and to make the best of it when the life is dramatically thrown off course. This is what Dante faced when he was accused of corruption and to be burned alive in a stake. He remained alone to himself in his home in Florence, the remaining 20 years of his life. He dropped into the depths of his inner world. From this time comes the Divine Comedy, an example of the interplay between the human and the divine. This is what the Christian existentialist philosopher Paul Tillich calls the method of correlation. The human questions of anxiety, meaninglessness, estrangement, etc. are correlated with religious answers. There is a mutual dependence between theology and existentialism, philosophy, and psychology, which is what allows us to get to the depths of reality. Dante the Pilgrim finds himself within a horrible dark forest, with straightforward parting lines being lost. He says, "I don't know how." Very often, we find ourselves in this situation. There are times when we don't recognize how we got where we are. We start out with certain goals we want to achieve, but as time passes, we make small choices and, without realizing it, end up somewhere completely different. As the Danish philosopher as he does not understand himself nor the purpose of his life, he requires some high ground, some way to orient himself. He sees high above him the sun shining over a hill, but his way is blocked by 3 beasts, and he's unable to pass through. There's no shortcut to self-realization. In his despair, a figure appears before Dante the pilgrim. It is the ancient Roman poet Virgil. He is a spiritual guide who will be Dante's companion through the various circles of hell that are divided according to the nature of the sins committed by those condemned there. Dante is led to the gate of hell. Above it reads, "Abandon old hope, ye who enter here." He is terrified and is not so sure he wants to enter. He also sees himself unworthy of such a journey. Virgil explains to him that Beatrice is waiting for him in paradise, the great love of Dante's life, whom he had fallen in love with when he was 9 years old. However, marriage between them was impossible. When Beatrice died at the age of 25, Dante was in Barcelona. The death inspired his early poems, and she appears as a personal myth of Dante's, a reality of his own mind and heart, a tribute that has become eternalized in his works. Dante dreams to enter the gate of hell, and thus begins his extraordinary journey to self-knowledge. Hell is depicted as 9 concentric circles of torment located within the earth. One might say that it is the journey of climbing to the depths of the unconscious. It is not just some sadistic observation of the eternal suffering of the damned, but an invitation to recognize one's own dysfunctions and see the consequences through myriads of punishments and revenge. Before descending into the first circle of hell, Dante and his guide pass through the vestibule of hell, where they hear the cries of anguish from the opportunists. These are the souls who were indifferent. They are guilty of the sin of fence-sitting. Since they took no sides, they are given no place. After this, they enter the first circle of hell, known as Limbo, which contains the unbaptized and virtuous pagans, who were not sinful, but were ignorant of Christ. Many of the great philosophers and poets reside there. In fact, this is also the home of Virgil, before he became Dante's guide. They are punished, or spend eternity without being able to see. After leaving Limbo, they never suffer again. The next circles contain lust, gluttony, greed, and wrath, symbolizing the self-indulgence. It is part of the upper hell. As one gets deeper into the circles of hell, the punishments get more harsh and painful. Dante makes all kinds of mistakes when he enters hell. Eventually, he learns that sin is not to be pitied. However, this lesson takes him many circles of hell to learn. When Dante faints upon witnessing the suffering, he is quickly awakened by Virgil, for it is a journey of vision. The next circles contain the lower hell. Circle 6 is home to the heretics. Here we find the Epicureans, who are trapped in tombs burning with fire. The Epicureans believed that the soul died with the body, and stated that pleasure was the chief good of life. The goal is to reach a state of tranquility without overindulgence and minimize suffering, which makes their punishment quite ironic. The next circles all have more concentric circles within themselves. The 7th circle is home to the violent, including violence to others, murder, violence to oneself, suicide, and violence against nature and God. Dante depicts most of the sins in certain ways, representing fraud and treachery, respectively. When they finally reach the very center of hell, they meet Lucifer, the fallen angel, who is condemned for committing the ultimate sin, pursuing treachery against God. He is stuck in a frozen lake, and the icy wind that comes from committing his sins ensures his own imprisonment. Around him, traitors are trapped in various depths, according to the severity of their sins. The devil is three-headed, which is the perversion of the Trinity. He is God's antithesis. Each head chews eternally on a prominent traitor. On the left and right appear Marcus and Gaius, who were involved in the assassination of Julius Caesar, and on the center is Judas, the apostle who betrayed Christ. Virgil and Dante strike down Lucifer's body. However, Virgil suddenly turns around and begins carving them on Lucifer's legs. This scares Dante, who believes they are going back to hell. Virgil reassures him that they are not. Things appear to be upside down because of the flip side of the world. This begins the second part of the work in purgatory. The older landmass in the waters of the southern hemisphere, formed by the impact of Lucifer's falling from heaven. Before we begin the purgatory, there are two important distinctions. Humans have intellect, the faculty of knowing and will, that is, choosing. The problem arises when one lacks knowledge and thus cannot make the right choices. However, even if one knows the right thing, one doesn't always make the right choices. Then he writes, to bring this but how to perform that which is good, I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. The first step for Dante is to get his faculty of knowing expanded. But why exactly do people sin? A person might choose to do something bad because he thinks it is good for him. It is often the case that what appears to be good is in fact bad. There must be a distinction between appearance and reality. If one asks a murderer, when you were committing your crime, did you know it was bad? It is likely that he will respond in the affirmative. In other words, the problem isn't the faculty of knowing, but the faculty of choosing. Dante was influenced by Aristotelian ethics, in which the lack of self-mastery is less condemnable than intentional pain and malice. That is why those who abuse the faculty of reason through violence, fraud, and treachery are in the deeper levels of hell, while the punishment of the self-indulgent is less severe. Hell is an eternal reality of what we have done. God doesn't send us to hell. We send ourselves to God. The doors of hell are locked on the inside. When we refuse the divine love, it lights up fires of suffering within us. That is hell. In the Inferno, Dante develops his faculty of knowing. However, when he reaches purgatory, it is not enough. He must learn how to use the intellect as a basis for making good choices. It is a discipline of the will. Purgatory is the place of catharsis and cleansing of the soul, where imperfections are burned away. Unlike hell and heaven, it is temporary. Every soul in purgatory will ultimately go to heaven. It is depicted as a 7-story mountain associated with the 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. In the first and most serious of the 7 levels is pride. This is the fundamental human sin. Eat this, the serpent says to Eve, and you will be like God. It is the desire to be God that led to the first sin in the Garden of Eden. While those in hell are people who try to justify their sins and are unrepentant, people in purgatory sinned but prayed for forgiveness before their deaths and must labor to become free of their sins. The work in purgatory is what Dante calls contrapasso, where one is forced to suffer the sin, work through it, and build a virtue. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung calls it an anchogomy, the emergence of the unconscious opposite in one's psyche. The prideful who elevated themselves are pressed down by great boulders. They carry their oppressive false persona until they can willingly let go of it. When they are able to do so, they stand tall, humbly, and free from what they mistakenly thought to be their true selves. Dante joins the prideful to carry boulders because he realizes that it is also a serious flaw of his own. After seeing all the sins in hell, one has work of purification to do in purgatory. The envious who looked with hatred upon other people and wanted to deprive them of their happiness out of resentment have their eyelids sewn shut. The wrathful walk around in blinding black smoke, which symbolizes the blinding effect of anger. The slothful have to run. The greedy lie face down on the ground and pray. The gluttonous are starved in the presence of trees, whose fruit is forever out of reach. And the lustful have to go through a wall of fire as a means of purification. Purgatory is like our real world. It is a place of transition. Heaven is above us, and hell is below us. We all have inner work to do. We must strive to lead as virtuous a life as we can. The goal is not perfection, but wholeness. When Dante reaches the top of Mount Purgatory, he's ready to fly to heaven, and is joined by Beatrice, who is his new spiritual guide. She leads him on a flight through the various levels of heaven. When we turn away from our self-centered ego, it is like a weight is off our shoulders, as if we would fly. G.K. Chesterton wrote, Angels can fly because they can take themselves lightly. Dante reaches the Empyrean, the highest point in heaven. He earns the rare privilege to be in the presence of God while he's still living. He explains that he cannot describe what he saw, because language is inadequate to do so. Knowing where intellect cannot take us is important, as well as what our human limitations are. God knows only himself, because God is the entire universe, and everything in the universe is his reflection. Dante understands that he must be able to see himself in God. As soon as he realizes this, his vision becomes flooded with a light so bright that he can't see anything. As Dante wrote, this is the result of perfect vision. For the brief period that he's in God's presence, he is at one with the universe. He has achieved union with God. To enter heaven is to become more human than you ever succeeded in being on earth. To enter hell is to be banished from humanity. Throughout the Divine Comedy, we see the constant interplay between the positive and the negative, the hopeful and the horrific. Salvation, as described by Dante, holds a striking parallel with the process of individuation defined by Carl Jung. The problem of individuation is that the psyche consists of two incongruous halves, which should together form a whole. To become individuated is to reconcile the dualities of the inner world and outer world, consciousness and the unconscious. And according to Jung, this is the most successful adaptation to the universal conditions of existence. To reconcile these dualities, the knowledge of symbols, the language of the unconscious, is indispensable. For it is in them that the union of conscious and unconscious is realized, creating our personal myth in life. In the beginning of the poem, Dante the Pilgrim has recognized the split in his personality, and that he must embark on a journey to become whole. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. The English poet and visionary artist William Blake wrote a book titled The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Unlike Milton and Dante, Blake describes hell not as a place of punishment, but as a place of energy. He writes, without contraries is no progression, attraction and repulsion, reason and energy, love and hate are necessary to human experience. From these contraries spring what the religious call good and evil. Good is the passive that obeys reason, evil is the active springing from energy. Good is heaven, evil is hell. Blake accepts the terminology of standard Christian morality, but he reverses its values. Conventional evil belongs to the devils, wrongdoers who suffer in hell. It is associated with the body, desires, and consists essentially of energy, abundance, actions, and freedom. Conventional good, which is manifested by angels who are in heaven, is associated with the soul, regarded as entirely separate from the body, and consists of reason, restraint, passivity, and prohibition. Blake rejects the dualism of body and soul, and both good and evil, heaven and hell, are necessary to life. He anticipated Freud's psychoanalysis with the conclusion that energy, or libido, called evil, arises from the unconscious, hell, and is restricted by reason, called good, the product of the superego, heaven. Blake imagines himself walking among the fires of hell, delighted with the enjoyments of genius, the devils being the original thinkers and revolutionists, which to the angels, who are conventional and complacent, looks like torment and insanity. Blake states that hell is full of energy, and energy is eternal delight. Fire is identified with the forces of the unconscious, the flames of inspiration, and possibly as the means of salvation. Blake's technique of revelation by the infernal method of melting apparent surfaces away and displaying the infinite which was hid reveals the proverbs of hell, which show a wisdom different from the biblical book of Proverbs. Some of these include, the road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom. He who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. You never know what is enough unless you know what is more than enough. Excess of sorrow, laughs. Excess of joy, weeps. Though Blake was a devout Christian, this work can be seen as a satire, parody, and criticism of orthodox values, as well as the so-called books of wisdom that were often published in condensed forms and consisting of collections of biblical verses to be taught in a rigid manner. Blake's proverbs are designed to put the individual's heart first, rather than laws. They are designed to energize imagination and human emotional response. Always be ready to speak your mind, and a base man will avoid you. The soul of sweet delight can never be defiled. Blake firmly believed that individuals must be able to freely exercise their imagination in order to construct a reality for themselves. This is what he calls the poetic genius. If there's one true religion for Blake, it is the divine spark of the imagination. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man is closing himself up till he sees all things through the narrow chinks of his cavern. Like dreaming or visioning, mythologizing is a process that takes a whole being to the borderlands of existence, a place beyond which our eyes can barely make out the vastness of a terra incognita. Yet those who decide to venture that far receive a gift to take back with them to the inhabited lands we are familiar with. What appears to be a journey of exile into the unknown is, in fact, a journey of returning home to the depths of the soul. There is only one way, and that is your way. There's only one salvation, and that is your salvation. Why are you looking around for help? Do you believe that help will come from outside? What is to come will be created in you and from you. Hence, look into yourself. Do not compare, do not measure. No other way is like yours. All other ways deceive and tempt you. You must fulfill the way that is in you. Just like Dante had Virgil as a guide, Young's personal guide was Philemon, a magician and wise old man that represented superior insight, whose words of wisdom was full of the sounds of life. On the other hand, Nietzsche's guide was the prophet Zarathustra, who grows weary of his wisdom after spending 10 years in solitude in the mountains, and speaks thus to the sun. I must descend into the depths, as you do in the evening when you go behind the sea, and still bring light to the underworld. You over-rich star, like you I must go under, go down, as said by man, to whom I want to descend. What is great in man is that he is a bridge, and not an end. What is lovable in man is that he is an overgoing and a down-going. In one of his lectures, Jung stated that a point exists at about the 35th year when things begin to change. It is the first moment of the shadow side of life, of the going down to death. It is clear that Dante found this point, and those who have read Zarathustra will know that Nietzsche also discovered it. When this turning point comes, people meet it in several ways. Some turn away from it, others plunge into it. And something important happens to yet others from the outside. If we do not see a thing, fate does it to us. In his late 30s, Jung experienced this midlife existential catastrophe and was overwhelmed with visions. In his hypnagogic state, he plunged into unknown depths, which he later called his confrontation with the unconscious, lasting from 1913 to 1916. Fearing psychosis, Jung kept a loaded revolver in the drawer of his night table in case the visions became unbearable. In the Red Book, Jung speaks of his descent into hell, which should not be understood as an aftermath of condemnation, but rather as a present living condition of utter bewilderment, encompassing a momentous existential change. What do you think of the essence of hell? Hell is when the depths come to you with all that you no longer are or are not yet capable of. Hell is when you can no longer attain what you could attain. Hell is when you think and feel and do everything that you know you do not want. Hell is when you know that your having to is also a wanting to, and that you yourself are responsible for it. Hell is when you know that everything serious that you have planned with yourself is also laughable, that everything fine is also brutal, that everything good is also bad, that everything high is also low. and that everything pleasant is
Your
also
scent is even
shameful.
more offensive than
The
usual.
roots of the tree of life reach into hell, and the top touches
Were I
heaven.
not been
Through
its
uniting
guest,
with the
I
self,
would tear
we
out
reach
your
God,
innards with
which
my
unites
bare
heaven and
claws.
hell in itself. The self
The singular
functions as a
virtue
union of
your
opposites,
kind is the way
and
you
thus constitutes
scream
the most
and
immediate
writhe,
experience of the
being
divine,
torn
which is
limb
at
from
all
limb.
psychologically comprehensible.
You
Jung found
would be
himself standing on the
surprised at how
highest
easily
tower of
one
a
becomes
castle.
carried away
He sees a
with
figure
praising
in the
one
distance,
for
who slowly makes his way to him.
Now then,
He hears
can I take
footsteps
your
in the
measurements
stairway,
for a new
and a strange
bronze?
fear comes over him. It is the devil, or as he calls him, the Red One. Jung has a conversation with him through active imagination. The Red One. I greet you, man on the high tower. I saw you from afar, looking and waiting. Your waiting has called me. Jung. Who are you? The Red One. Who am I? You think I am the devil. Do not pass judgment. Perhaps you can also talk to me without knowing who I am. What sort of superstitious fellow are you, that immediately you think of the devil? Jung. If you have no supernatural ability, how could you feel that I stood on my tower, looking out for the unknown and the new? My life in the castle is poor, since I always sit here and no one climbs up to me. The Red One. So, what are you waiting for? Jung. I await all kinds of things, and especially I'm waiting for some of the world's wealth, which we don't see here, to come to me. The Red One. So I've come to absolutely the right place. I've wandered a long time through the world, seeking those like you who sit upon a high tower, have a look out for things unseen. You make me curious. You seem to be a rare breed. Your appearance is not ordinary. And then, too, forgive me, it seems to me that you bring with you a strange air, something worldly, something impudent, or exuberant, or in fact, something pagan. As Jung continues his conversation, the Red One is amused by his ponderous speech and seriousness. He tells Jung that life doesn't require any seriousness. On the contrary, it's better to dance through life. Jung tells him that he knows how to dance, and the devil is surprised, for he considers dancing to be of his own province. Thus they reach common ground. The peculiarity of the devil is that he fails to take seriously anything that the devil is convinced that dancing is neither lust nor madness, but an expression of joy. In this, Jung agreed with the devil, echoing what Nietzsche wrote. You higher men, the worst thing about you is, none of you has learned to dance as a man ought to dance and yours. Jung ends his conversation with the Red One as follows. Jung, perhaps too lazy born for a God that one can call about. But I haven't found this joy. I look out for things that are yet to come. Things came and joined this world. The Red One. Don't you recognize me?
It's in the bag.
I am you. Compute your joy. I see you as through a cloud. Your image fades. Let me take your hand, beloved. Who are you? Who are you? Joy? Was he joy? Jung humorously confronted his devil and behaved with him as with a real person. He learned to take seriously every unknown wanderer who personally inhabits his inner world. He was his joy, the joy of a serious person who, having tasted this joy, forgets himself, and there's nothing sweeter than forgetting himself. Jung writes, if you ever have the rare opportunity to speak with the devil, then do not forget to confront him in all seriousness. He is your devil after all. The devil as the adversary is your own other standpoint. He tempts you and sets a stone in your path where you least want it. Taking the devil seriously does not mean going over to his side without trying to conquer him. Rather, it means coming to an understanding, thereby you accept your other standpoint. With that, the devil fundamentally loses everything, and so do you, and that made me well and good. And you realized that the devil was joy. He wanted to make a pact with him, but he couldn't make a pact with joy because he believed in illicit things. The essence of the devil is that he cannot be happy. The devil seeks to saw off the branch on which you sit. That is useful and protects one from falling asleep and from the vices that go along with it. The devil isn't joy, but joy. You see that joy also has
What you got for me this time?
since then you're bound at pleasure, and from pleasure go straight to hell. your own particular hell, which turns out differently for everyone. Unlike Faust, who in his depression and dissatisfaction with life sold his soul to the devil in exchange for power, knowledge, and material gain, he avoids this danger by reaching a mutual agreement. He achieved some joy, and the devil accepted some of June's seriousness. It is always a risky thing to accept joy. It cannot be pursued, it must ensue. What June initially perceived as a deeply critical period leading him to the brink of madness eventually came to represent the source of the most creative and significant period of his life, the stuff and material for more than one life as he lived. For your purified one's vision, one traveled through hell, first of all, the acknowledgement and integration of the evil conjugal through one falls the shadow. However, to recognize the relative evil of our nature, it is a rare and shattering experience to gaze into the face of absolute evil. Whoever fights with nonsense should see to it that he does not become one himself, and when you stare for a long time into an abyss, the abyss both bad and beautiful. The descent into hell is a cathartic journey which leads to self-knowledge, self-transformation, and ultimately self-transcendence. It is easy to get into, but very difficult to exit. It epitomizes a process of self-transformation similar to what the alchemists intended with the Negredo phase of spiritual transformation and putrefaction. A dangerous yet healing descent into one's inner underworld. Only in the reach of danger can one find the treasure hard to attain. Everything in the human mind belongs to the natural plane of it, which regulates life. Real self-transformation shall never be complete without man's reconciliation of heaven and hell. He who goes to hell also becomes hell. Therefore, do not forget from whence we come. The depths are stronger than us. So do not be heroes. Be clever and drop at lives, since nothing is more dangerous than to play the hero.
Algo. Son chistes son un poquito crueles.
Philosophy is a mode of life, an act of living, and a way of being. Modern philosophy has forgotten this tradition, and philosophical discourse has all but overtaken philosophy as a way of life. Philosophy is not just an intellectual discipline which can get abstract and divorced from the real world, but is most importantly a way of life that teaches us how best to live our lives. Now, carpenter does not come up to us and say, "Listen to me speak about of carpentry," but makes a contract for a house and builds it. So must we, when confronted with life, put our knowledge into practice, and not be like those who devour books and can astonish others by their skill in argumentation, but who, when it comes to their own lives, contradict their own teachings. Philosophy is a mode of existing in the world, which has to be practiced at each instant, the goal of which is to transform the whole of the individual. Real wisdom does not merely cause us to know, it makes us be differently. The goodness of our lives depends on our soul, by which we can make good use of other valuable things, such as health, pleasure, happiness, tranquility, and so on, which can make a real contribution towards a good life. By contrast, a bad soul will create bad desires, bad choices, and the misuse of potential goods. Thus we spiral down a bad life, characterized by vice. The condition of the soul is entirely a matter of developing and understanding fundamental truths about human nature, and as a consequence of those, about the nature of what is valuable for a human being. If we fulfill our nature by pursuing a virtuous life, our soul remains in a healthy state, enabling us to live a good and happy life. Even if we experience suffering, pain, loss of goods, or failure, what concerns external and bodily goods do not diminish the quality of our lives at all, for these are ever-changing. Bad things will always happen to us, as if they constantly move in the outer rim of the circle of life. However, virtue puts us back in the strong foundation of the center of the circle, where the soul resides. But people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. French philosopher Pierre are an excellent introduction to ancient Greco-Roman philosophy. Adorno emphasizes the importance of what he calls spiritual exercises, which go beyond simply exercises of thought or moral exercises. Rather, they correspond to a transformation of our vision of the world and to a metamorphosis of our personality. These exercises do not only have an ethical value, but also spiritual exercises in ancient philosophy is meant to emphasize, first and foremost, that in the ancient schools of thought, philosophy was a way of life. The lesson of ancient philosophy consisted in an invitation
with his own assemblage of amazing arachnids to annex, annul, abolish, and annihilate their adversaries. As in the way it is undertaken, with what attitude and method, and with a view to which goal. It requires a complete attention to and focus upon an activity, and implies immersing oneself so completely in the matter at hand that one forgets oneself, much like what is known as a flow experience. To take flight every day, or release from a moment which may be brief as long as it is intense. In spiritual exercise, either alone or in company of someone spiritual exercise and the itch for talking out which sometimes goes wisdom brings about peace of mind, inner freedom, and cosmic consciousness. These three essential aspects of the philosophical way of life
No necesitamos, no necesitamos. Estoy poniendo el concepto de que es muy necesitamos, pero lo queremos. ¿Entendiste qué es? Hiciste preguntar. Vaya. Yo no conocí la persona. Pero con gatos en lugar de animales. Ay, Dios. No me dices que Dios. Appears above all as the construction of a technical jargon reserved for specialists.
For Edo, philosophy as an art of living can be traced as far back as Socrates, born in the 5th century BC, and considered as the founder of Western philosophy. Socrates started a new shift in philosophy as the pursuit and love of wisdom applied to daily life. Though the work of the natural philosophers or pre-Socratics were essential to the development of classical Greek philosophy, it was Socrates who taught us how we ought to live, and therefore that we need first and foremost to consider moral questions. Socrates never wrote anything and questioned everything ordinary people took for granted or left unquestioned. He would walk around the streets of Athens and ask others to explain seemingly simple concepts such as friendship, justice, piety, and courage, only for the interlocutor to realize that he did not know how to explain them or would contradict himself. The Oracle of Delphi stated that Socrates was the wisest person in Athens, but Socrates believed he was wiser than others because he was the only person who recognized his own ignorance. Unlike the sophists, who would trade wisdom for money and would speak for their own benefit, Socrates would never accept money and would speak for the benefit of the interlocutor. He taught people to listen to their conscience, the inner voice that tells one what is truly right. And if one doesn't know what to say, one should keep asking questions to oneself and others until one finds out. An answer is worth nothing unless it comes from one's own thinking. It is the process of philosophical thinking that counts at least as much as the answers. The nature of the questioning is that one has to think for oneself. The enigmatic figure of Socrates was a master of dialogue with others and of dialogue with himself. The Delphic maxim, know thyself, requires a relationship of the self to itself that constitutes the basis of all spiritual exercise. Every spiritual exercise is dialogical, insofar as it is an exercise of authentic presence of the self to itself and of the self to others. Our default view of the self as isolated, individualistic, and egocentric reinforces that increasingly characterize Athens today. However, this default self is not our real self. There is a higher, more authentic self, which the ancient Greeks called daimon, a self which is constantly aware of its own interaction with other human beings, with nature, and with the entire cosmos. When our inner daimon is in a state of good order, state of good spirit, and fulfillment. As philosophers, we must learn how to dialogue, the dialectical exercise TPKd, diving at the soul. Dialogue is only possible if the interlocutor has a real desire to dialogue. That is, if he truly wants to discover the truth, besides the good and the depths of his soul, and agrees to submit to the rational talents of the moment.
Try not to get put in personal territory.
I have to obey the will of the that living great dialogues, where I will, that's how they find the truth. Generally, it means two souls together to distinguish this from the live in the original version of the Logos. Logos estimates rational the thought which exists in the rational principle that governs the organization of the universe. Rationality and clear-mindedness allows one to live in the Logos.
What you got for me this time?
Such a way that they will be impossible through their introspection. Awakening of the crisis, psychology and psych professor John Renata explains that ancient Greek philosophers had a different conception of rationality than our modern one. To be rational is not merely to engage in reasoning arguments, logic or propositional knowledge, but also to transform ourselves, others, and the world. It is an existential endeavor that changes our mode of being. It is a process of participation. Rationality is to effectively realize our self-perception and illusion, and the need for self-correction is the deep concept of reality. More than to inform the interlocutor or reader, so as to lead him to transformation. This way of thinking was important as well as good above fear, the soul above the mind. In his prime, he stated, "It is the greatest good for a person to discuss virtue every day, and those are the things about which I am conversing, to test myself and others. An unexamined life is not worth living." Plato, Aristotle, and all the rest of the sages The death of Socrates was traumatic for many Athens, and one of his followers, Plato, made his attempts to immortalize the figure of Socrates as a philosopher, that is, as a man who saw Plato's world and his way of life, to approach and to make others approach the way of truth or wisdom. Plato characterized the Socratic spirit in his great work and later departed from his answer, for the true follower of Socrates will think such. From this perspective, the philosophy of Plato, and following him, all the philosophies of antiquity, even those which were farthest away from Platonism, all shared the aim of establishing an intimate link between philosophical discourse and way of life. Platonism became the bedrock of Western philosophy and spirituality, influencing Christianity and later evolving into new